Okay, so we just read the story, the Frog King or Iron Henry in Grimm's Tales. And the version I have is the first one. Uh, do you want to give a quick summary, or you want me to?
I could remember. I think I remember most of it. So there was a
Okay.
kingdom and a kid. I mean, a king had three daughters, and the youngest one was considered the most beautiful. Um, yeah, and yeah, one day she was playing nearby at was it a lake or like a well?
Yeah, well, there's a dark forest,
Yeah,
but yeah, well, and a lime tree.
yeah, yeah, like near a dark forest. And she had a golden ball, and the ball fell into the well, I believe.
Yeah, she was playing with a
Uh,
golden ball. Yeah,
yeah, she started crying, and then a frog heard her. And then when the frog asked her what was wrong, she said that she had lost her ball, and the frog offered to retrieve the ball in exchange for a gift, and he wasn't interested in the jewelry and clothes she had offered him, but he was interested in kind of being her companion or friend.
yeah,
Uh, so she agreed to it, and he went to go retrieve the ball. But when he gave her the ball, it seemed she had no intention of honoring her agreement.
yeah,
So
yeah. It
she just,
included that thought, like in the story.
yeah. So she just ran away and hoped he wouldn't find her. But the next day, she was having dinner with her father, and she heard some knocking at the door, and I think she kept ignoring it until her father asked her who it might be, and she explained what had happened with the ball and the promise she made with the frog. Um, and the king kind of held her to keep that promise and commanded her to have the frog eat with her and sleep in her room and all the things she had promised him. And she did so reluctantly. And at one
And she
point she
thought he
was
was disgusting when he was eating. And in
mhm,
various times, she calls him disgusting.
mhm. So yeah, she reluctantly takes him to her room, and the frog wanted to rest on her bed, and she was angry and kind of disgusted, and she threw him against the wall. And when that happened, I guess he turned back into a man, and it turns out he was a prince from another kingdom who had been turned into a frog by an evil witch. And
Yeah, it says
after
he has
that,
kind eyes. It says he has
mhm,
kind eyes.
mhm. So yeah, after that, uh, his people from his kingdom came uh, to get him, and the plan was that they were going to get married, and the princess, would go to his kingdom with him. And one of his servants was yeah, very like heartbroken after he had been lost for so long. And on the way back to his kingdom, he described how there was like three what's it was it like a chain or some sort of wire
Golden
around his
bands
bands
that he
around his
had
heart.
had like around his
Hmm.
torso or heart, I guess, because he had been because it was going to burst with
Hmm.
grief otherwise.
Yeah, yeah. So along the way, there would be these noises and stuff, and every time they would stop, the prince thought that something was going on with the wagon or carriage, and it all those sounds they were hearing were just like the bands breaking off. Um, from what I think is the heartbreak, maybe kind of healing or something.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, when the prince left, he was heartbroken, and now his heart is swelling with joy at the return and the prince's happiness, something like that. The cycle is complete. It's a circle. The band around his chest is a circle thing.
Mm.
Yeah, what'd you think of that story?
Mm. I liked it. It was a nice short story, and yeah, one of the obvious lessons I noticed was just kind of keeping your word, um, and not minimizing, I guess, the things you say.
Yeah. Well, it seems like maybe you could see things, there's like contrasting types of things here. One is the childish things, like
Hmm.
she innocently goes to a dark forest, which could be a very dangerous place where
Hmm.
lots of things happen. And there's a deep well that sort of maybe
Hmm.
signifies, you could say it's like the unconscious or just possibilities and dark things.
Hmm.
There's a tree next to that. The tree, trees could be symbolic of uh just, I don't know, some kind of growth or something. I'm just thinking of like Joseph
Hmm.
Campbell says that the tree that is grows out of the world navel or something is often symbolic of some kind of like Christ was crucified on a tree, Buddha. So he ascent, he made his ultimate transformation on
Hmm.
like the cross, which could be seen as like a tree. um it connects heaven and earth, and maybe down below it connects all those things.
Hmm.
Like Buddha attained enlightenment under the Bodhi tree. There's this maybe something about transformation about trees. I don't know if there's
Hmm.
something specific about it being a lime tree like in this one. um but yeah, so she there's lots of innocent kinds of things here to her, like she's just playing with a golden ball, could be symbolic of the sun. She's just in a nice lake and getting shade under a tree in a nice little forest. Everything is innocent to her. She sees a frog, and it's just a frog, not to be taken seriously. But also, though, there's this feeling of disgust, which is maybe, I don't know if that signifies sexuality or transformation or something. I think disgust is interesting. And I think it can be related to sexuality in some way, which is kind of interesting.
Hmm.
I mean, yeah, disgust is learned. Uh, it and it's kind of the opposite of like being turned on, where especially for a woman, you're like ready to sort of open yourself up to, like, how can I say, like somebody's body,
Hmm.
uh and all sorts of, you know possibility for life and disease and everything. uh yeah, and promises too. Like she just makes a promise, like just trying to
Yeah.
get what she wants, like innocently, deviously, without knowing
Hmm.
the consequences of it. So there's all the things that she takes as very innocent that are actually that could actually be seen as very serious. And then on the other hand, there's all the serious things, like making a promise, like her golden crown, which is like her birthright, the rulership of the kingdom, etc. Like she offers to give that up just to get her little golden toy ball. Like she doesn't take it seriously.
Hmm.
There's the king and the the castle. So yeah, so to me, I don't know. You can look at it, it's like there's innocence and very serious things, and story is about her transformation from seeing everything in terms of not taking it seriously to seeing everything in a serious way growing up.
Hmm.
Why do you think she's so disgusted with the frog?
No, it's like now that you kind of talk of contrast, I guess I'm kind of thinking perhaps the whole forest and her disgust reactions are kind of the showing the potential for darkness she has within herself. Since in the
Right,
beginning, she's pretty much praised for her beauty and she's so beautiful that the sun is astonished every time it shines on her.
right,
Um,
yeah.
so
There's
she
only
seems,
positive emotion associated with her.
yeah, so she seems almost kind of worshipped, I guess, and people only see her in a positive kind of way. Um, yeah, but then that kind of changes, like contrast, like you mentioned, with her like spending a lot of time in that dark forest, and she seems to kind of shift from this like ideal girl to yeah, just someone with disgust at this frog and not really being the best kind of person you can be
She
in
has
that
negative
situation.
emotion, she has
Yeah.
revulsion at something. Like, even though everybody loves her, the first living thing she comes upon in the story she
Hmm.
hates the sight of, even though it can't, he kind of wants to benefit her or something like that. So
Hmm.
she's like very spoiled.
Yeah. So like even though like yeah, because beauty is seen as good a lot of the time, but it seems she at that point she isn't necessarily developed to be the best person that she can be on the inside.
Yeah. I don't know if it's three cardinal virtues or three cardinal things or something, but truth, beauty, and goodness. She has beauty, but she has no relation to goodness or truth.
Mm-hmm.
But then later on, the king makes her keep her word, so she has um some kind of, and she learns that the frog is actually a human being, and uh the spell of the witch's trickery has been broken, and uh his he has been, the prince has been found, whereas he was lost before by Iron John or Iron Henry or whatever, the faithful servant. There's truth there, and then goodness is, I don't know where goodness is, but seems like, I don't know, the whole story ends up good in some way or something.
Yeah.
But yeah, yeah, Joseph Campbell points out that oftentimes what is it that one has, yeah, there's unexpected one's, boons or helpful things in a story often come unexpectedly. So she's just playing with her ball innocently, and then she drops it into the well accidentally, and that's where the whole action of the story happens, just from this little accident. Otherwise, she would have just kept kind of being like an innocent little girl. Just she would have gone back home when she was tired, when the day wasn't so hot, nothing would have happened from that accident. The helper comes even though she refuses the help of the helper. I wonder if there was some other story that this is the other side of, like the witch, you know, uh, uh in enchants or whatever the prince. I'm sure there's some story there, right, where he
Yeah.
turns into a frog, but he has to have someone fall in love with him or something. But this is sounding like Sleeping Beauty or something like that, right?
Mm-hmm.
He has to do something difficult, something very difficult from his current state of being a frog, like in order to have the spell lifted.
Mm-hmm.
So it seems like an impossible kind of thing, impossible kind of labor or task to do.
Yeah, that seems closer to my idea. Like when I was first hearing the story, I thought this was going to be like another one with like the Greek story where Persephone is playing in a field alone and then Hades kidnaps her. So when I heard the Dark Forest, I was kind of expecting that direction for that, but it didn't really go that way.
Yeah, dark forest full of trees. I don't know. Transformation, darkness, the unknown. Like a lot of what stories are is just about the reader or the listener encountering the unknown, and then what is there and what kind of transformation or growth can happen from that encounter, which is sort of maybe the utility of stories, and also our interest, because we want to play or we want to try things out first in story form, in words, and then we can learn sort of in some way, sort of like vicariously, or just it's a kind of virtual experience as we're listening to the story that will maybe carry forward as we encounter the unknown in real life. But also part of that unknown is in stories is like certain archetypical kinds of characters and things as that will maybe help us to type people as we encounter them in real life, and make them a little more predictable and help us to know how to act in the real world. Well, so we both recently watched the movie, the Steven Soderberg Solaris, made around 2002 or so. Do you want to give the summary for that, or you want me to?
That's a longer story. Should do that one.
Oh, I would probably just do a quick summary, but
Yeah.
yeah, so it takes place sort of in the foreseeable future, but where there's been a lot more space travel. It's like a regular thing to go into space. We see this psychiatrist named Dr. Kelvin. So kind of a scientific name given to him. And he's a widower. And as the story unfolds, we kind of get glimpses of his past life with his wife, meeting her, encountering her first and meeting her, and then their life together a little bit, but later on we kind of see that it ended poorly. She actually committed suicide. She was kind of unstable, unhappy. And what I would like to get into most is sort of maybe speculation as to his being a psychiatrist and her being like a sort of needy person, and his kind of feelings about, his sort of attraction to her, or his feelings about kind of wanting to make it right, as he said later on. But anyway, so he's alone now. He's kind of living a kind of mundane life, like he's chopping vegetables when he gets a visitor from corporation, and they give him a video sent by one of his colleagues who's on on the spaceship orbiting this planet named Solaris, and there has been an attempted rescue expedition after some kind of mysterious catastrophe happened on the spacecraft. And the message from the friend is cryptic. He won't explain what's going on, but he says you just have to come see it for yourself. So that was one thing I questioned about the movie. But anyway, he goes, and so he goes, and of course they have the classical kind of docking sequence, that you see probably many movies, but I think the earliest one that I know of is 2001: A Space Odyssey, kind of like slow docking sequence with like music. You see it later on in it takes on a bigger role in Christopher Nolan's Interstellar. Yeah, he goes on the ship. There is the first human being he meets is like that kind of skinny guy that's playing the weird music, and he's asked to explain what's been going on, but he can't really. He speaks very cryptically. I think it's kind of entertaining to listen to him. And then Dr. Kelvin meets a scientist who's a serious lady, but she's like very scared and kind of holed up in her room, and she also says it's kind of pointless to speak to him about what's going on until he experiences it for himself. So then he goes to sleep, and we again have the like Japanese gamelan kind of music sequence going, and I think snatches of his life with his wife come up, and those blend with like his seeming wife appearing in the room. And so we find out that what's been going on has been that the planet Solaris, which sort of resembles some sort of living thing, it's amorphous, it's has like sort of spark like things and connections kind of like being made around it. It's very blue, which is like water, emotions, life kind of thing. Makes like some type of living seemingly conscious version of like your most cherished or sought after or longed for loved one. And so that's what's happened with him. Now his dead wife has been seemingly resurrected. But what's really interesting is like her kind of coming to realize like I'm not who I think I am. Like I'm some weird version, because she is, she is a version of his cognition and memory of his wife rather than the actual person. So she knows biographical details about herself that he knew, but she doesn't remember experiencing them, for instance, which is kind of an interesting character to make. And I thought the actress, I think Natasha McElhone, that plays her, did a really good job, because she really seemed like a different person in the previous in the sequences where they showed the real wife on Earth and where they showed the Solaric recreation on the spaceship. It seemed like a different person. She had like a different demeanor and facial expression. They may have done different things to the makeup and lighting and things too, but so then he's very freaked out, but he does kind of what is the right thing to do, which is to not, for mental health, you have to not let some of your demons take over. Like, even though they're very tempting, they're very attractive. So, I mean, putting aside her separate existence as a conscious being and everything, he does what I think is the mentally healthy, the commonsensical right thing to do, which is to just like a tough love kind of thing, where he jettisons her out of the spaceship, and it's a very sad thing to watch. And she's, it's a terrible thing to look at her kind of change in demeanor as she realizes what's happening. But anyway, he does that. But then later she, another version of her manifests, but now it's a different story, even though it's a repetition. He has different thoughts, and he kind of starts to form this idea around why he wants her to stick around, or eventually he wants to stick around. And So, and there's other things that happen in the movie, but that's a summary of the kind of, I don't know, first half of it or so. But he eventually decides to give in to the temptation of Solaris, the Mephistopheles writ large, and kind of goes down with the ship. He decides not to break himself off and to return to reality, bleak reality, and decides to live a sort of eternal dream in Solaris with that wife. Do you remember, that second version had actually tried to kill herself, and she actually did kill herself. Oh, but it got reconstituted, or does he end up, does a third version end up being manifested? That
Yeah, I thought maybe just like his emotions and feelings were so strong that it somehow overcame the fact that the second
disintegration,
version was killed. But that was kind of a question I had in the movie too. But that's what
maybe
I
it's just a
assumed.
third version.
Uh,
Yeah, because it seems like the second version was showing that whenever his memory of her is manifested, I thought she ends up kind of realizing that, like, I am wrong, like this is not right.
yeah, but also when they're about trying to leave the ship, like you can see Solaris like flaring red and stuff. So I thought maybe the planet was so intent on it that it somehow overcame the disintegration to make that third version of her, even though she didn't want to be there, at least in her second version form. She kind of
Yeah.
knew she shouldn't be.
Well, what makes you think her second manifestation has anything to do with the third? I thought they're independent. I mean, it's not. Are you thinking this is the same soul being recreated or something like that?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I think they're separate. I mean, the way I think about it is they're separate things. So it's not like anything that the second one would have done would have affected the third one. But what I'm thinking is that it's just, there's a certain set of facts or something like that that make up this person, and it is likely that she will come to the conclusion that, like, this isn't right. But then again, you could say maybe she doesn't come to the second version doesn't come to that conclusion, except for the fact that she starts to be led down the dark path of faithlessness in her husband when she realizes he killed the first version of her. Yeah. We want, many of us think we want to live in a dream, but the people of Solaris, the people near Solaris, are confronted with a dream, and most of them choose to seemingly to stay with the dream. At least anyway, it's very tempting. John Vervaeke has this interesting idea that, it may sound obvious or something like that, but the way I say it, but he says that we basically do, like, people want some kind of deeply connected experience with the world, and we do want transcendent kinds of experiences, but we do want them to have something to do with the truth. And he gives the example, like, that most people want like if there's like, let's say you could have the situation where your significant other, like you have a really, really good relationship with your significant other. Everything's perfect, but they're cheating on you, and you'll never find out if you don't want to, but would you want to know? Like, even if it never affected anything, they would never leave you, et cetera, et cetera. I hope I'm not messing this up, but basically most people still would want to know. So that's an indication to him that people do want to know the truth in some way. Yeah.
Mm.
But either way, like, I do think this movie is a good kind of way to think about, do we want to know the truth? I mean, I just can't imagine the plot would work if it were like 5 or 10 years later, or if, I think it really has to be where he's a psychiatrist, she committed suicide, he felt and was sort of partially responsible for it because she had told him, like, she had been in a particularly depressive episode for a long time, and he was fed up, and he was saying he was going to leave, and she was saying she can't live without him, and then he leaves the house and then she kills herself, and then he comes back that day kind of regretting it, and then really, really regretting it when he finds the body. I mean, all of this adds up to just like really, really feeling like her death was wrong. You know, he's not just grieving, but he feels like it's really wrong. And as he says, when he decides to keep the second manifestation around, he wants to make it right. I don't know. What do you think about the movie?
I just thought, no, I just was thinking that idea you introduced about truth kind of, it probably explains why I felt so upset and disappointed at the end. Because I felt that he had just rejected truth in favor of a lie, I guess.
Yeah, he did.
Um,
I mean, he's living in a dream. He decides to live with like a manifestation of his own mind that that is based on a real person.
mm-hmm.
Yeah. And also he decides to reject like mortality, seemingly, because he says, are we even alive? And she said, kind of like, we're beyond those kinds of distinctions. Which is also, I mean, in terms of what world they're living in, sort of, it's a little disturbing, because maybe, yeah, they're living on a different plane, like a sort of purgatory, or a sort of, they're living in some sort of plane that's eternal but not heavenly, so it's, you could say it's like a hell. And like you said, that was before the planet became red, and maybe it was like, you could say it disguises itself as a heaven and then reveals itself to be a hell.
Yeah, that line just really disturbed me. Like, I think I almost thought to myself, well, that's bullshit.
It was BS. I mean, yeah, she's not answering the question.
Yeah, he doesn't care that she doesn't answer the question.
Yeah, I mean, he will eventually. And then, so yeah, maybe it is a hell, like, as he goes on to see, like, what kind of life do we have right now, going into the future. Like you're supposed to grow old, you're supposed to lose each other eventually, supposed to you're supposed to die. In the way that you live on is through passing on things, or passing on yourself in some way to the future through children, ideas, influence, connections, legacy. But yeah, it's a good movie, disturbing.
Mm.
Do you have any more thoughts?
But I do remember you saying you wanted to talk about why they might have been attracted to each other in the first place.
Oh, right, yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. I think there might be something interesting there, but I don't really understand what it might be.
Mm.
I mean, yeah, I mean, if he's a psychiatrist, he wants to help people, heal people, he wants to see people not suffer. He has ways of making that happen. Perhaps he's maybe a good listener. Although I think I told you it's interesting that the way he's presented in terms of his like learnedness is not very flattering. Um,
Yeah, his practice just kind of seemed very empty to me.
yeah, well, this is also as he's grieving. I mean, or
Mm.
probably still grieving.
Yeah, it's like I don't have any deep ideas of why they might have been drawn to each other. Just on a surface level, I could see that she was more artistic and sensitive and trying to look for meaning. And meanwhile, like his ideas kind of maybe he was like a little uh not empty, but maybe just very too rational almost in this like out view or something of the world. Uh
Yeah, like they had that sort of spirituality discussion, and him and his educated friends were seemed like they had the worldview, like an atheistic worldview, but not really a transcendent one, where it's just
mm,
sort of. And she was voicing maybe some sort of a possibility of a god or some
mm,
kind of transcendence or something like
mhm,
that. And then he or they sort of dismiss her for that and sort of make her feel rejected and try to make her look stupid or something like that,
mhm,
you know. And she goes back to some room and just lying in a bed and saying, just I don't want to talk to those people anymore.
mhm,
Yeah, and it's funny that a rationalistic person would later on choose to live in a dream. There's probably something there.
mm,
Maybe his worldview didn't account for, um, just didn't feed him in some ways. I think this is kind of true of so many rationalists or scientifically minded atheist people, that I wonder if their worldview sort of helps you deal with the eternal things like death, and helps your depth in terms of your understanding of your own experience and love and as a human being and everything. Like I think it's incredibly satisfying intellectually, uh to have a very scientific worldview, but I think you need more as a mortal being that longs for connection and some sort of transcendence or something, because of your sense of your we have a sense of expansiveness or something about the world.
Yeah, and I think maybe it didn't help him that he was so rational in his worldview for so much. I mean, maybe it kind of made him more vulnerable in the end because he had never considered, like the other possibilities or something.
Yeah,
Until that
maybe
point in time.
that's why he was attracted to her. She kind of, he was overly rationalist and she was sort of maybe overly emotional, and yeah, but if only he could have learned from that rather than sort of shut it down.
Yeah, like she was that way, but then like in her second version, you could kind of see her kind of being a little more rational about her existence. That's kind of a little interesting, I guess. They kind of went reverse almost.
But I don't know. Maybe. I don't think she was not rational
Yeah.
in her
Yeah,
life before. It's
not
just
that
that
she
wasn't the
wasn't.
salient characteristic. But
Yeah.
she was faced in her second manifestation. I mean, she was faced with existential questions that she was trying to deal with honestly. Like she shouldn't be, sort of. And that's why she killed herself. I don't know. There's probably a lot there that is. Anyway, yeah, an interesting movie. Anything more to add?
No, it's just yeah, I think it's a movie I would rewatch actually. So I think I liked it. Actually, I liked it even though it disappointed me a lot. But I guess good movies kind of inspire emotions, good or bad.
Yeah, it's not about
Yeah.
just identifying and liking
Yeah.
liking who the people are, wanting to know them or something. Okay. Well, maybe try another story next time. Okay. Well, good talking to you.
Same.